In this video, you're going to learn why your autoimmune treatment is not working and the primary drivers of autoimmunity to focus on to get results. Getting this right can mean the difference between suffering from autoimmune flare-ups and tissue destruction, or putting autoimmune into remission and getting your life back. I'm Dr. Peter Kahn, board-certified chiropractic neurologist and functional medicine doctor. Now, if you or your loved one have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition or suspect you have an autoimmune condition, or if you have a mystery condition that nobody has been able to diagnose, you're in the right place. This video was created just for you, to give you answers and a path to get your life back. Now, autoimmune disease does not just affect one organ. It typically causes what I call the brain, immune, gut triad. Your symptoms may be brain-based, such as fatigue, brain fog, short-term memory loss, depression, lack of motivation, anxiety. You may have trouble getting the words out or remembering names. You may have trouble focusing or concentrating. You may even have neurological symptoms like numbness, tingling, weakness, and balance problems. Now, if you have any of these brain-based symptoms, even just one, let me know in the comments by typing the word brain. By doing this poll, you'll see how many people suffer with the same things. Now, your symptoms may be immune system issues, such as chronic inflammation leading to aches, pain, stiffness. You may have skin manifestations of inflammation like eczema, psoriasis. You may have chronic infections that you can't clear, such as viruses, bacteria, or parasites, or even have allergies to your environment, such as chemicals, scents, perfumes, and even food. Now, if you have any of these immune system problems, type the word immune in the comments. Let's see how many of you have immune system challenges. Now, you may even have gut symptoms such as gas, bloating, burping, heartburn, reflux, constipation, loose stool. You may even have alternating constipation and loose stool, gut pain, cramps, leaky gut, and malabsorption. Now, type the word gut in the comments if you struggle with these gut symptoms. Now, here's a kicker. Do you have symptoms in multiple categories? If you do, that means you have brain immune gut axis dysfunction. Brain immune gut stands for BIG, and that is a big problem. Type big in the comments if you have symptoms in multiple categories or all three categories. You'll see just how big the problem is. Now, if you do have any of these symptoms, don't despair. You're not alone. Autoimmune disease tend to create symptoms in multiple areas of the body. And that's why it's so important that you understand why it does that, because that's how you're also going to reverse engineer the solution. But know that symptoms even one of these areas can really put a damper on your quality of life, not to mention if you have multiple symptoms. Now, I know this all too well because I have helped over 6,000 clients overcome their chronic conditions, such as autoimmune disease, since 2009. So let's dive in and show you why the current model of autoimmune treatment is insufficient. Now, first of all, what is autoimmunity? One of the main functions of the immune system is to protect the body by responding to invading microbes, such as viruses and bacteria, by producing antibodies or white blood cells that are sensitized and ready for action. Now, under normal conditions, an immune response cannot be triggered against your own body. However, sometimes the immune cells make a mistake and attack the very cells that they're meant to protect. Now, this can lead to a variety of autoimmune diseases. Now, what causes autoimmunity? Well, the immune system normally distinguishes self from non-self tissue. Some white blood cells are capable of reacting against self tissue, resulting in an autoimmune reaction. Now, normally, these white blood cells that does that are suppressed. Here's something you may not be aware of. Autoimmunity is normal. It occurs naturally in everyone to some degree. And in most people, it does not result in disease. Autoimmune disease occurs when there is some interruption of the usual control process, allowing white blood cells to avoid suppression, or when there's some change in your body tissue so that it's no longer recognized as self and therefore is being attacked. Now, researchers are still working out why the immune system malfunctions like this, but it's thought that bacteria, viruses, toxins, even stress and blood sugar problem can play a role in triggering the autoimmune process in somebody who's already genetically predisposed to develop such a disorder. Now, research is clear that inflammation initiated by the toxins or infections can push your immune system into this autoimmune pattern to become more sensitive in those involved tissues. Now, what are the different types of autoimmune disorders? Well, autoimmune disorders are typically classified into two main types. There's an organ-specific type, and then there's the non-organ specific type. Autoimmune process can manifest in various ways. For example, you can have a gradual, slow destruction of a specific cell or tissue, such as in Hashimoto's when you have thyroid gland destruction gradually leading to hypothyroidism. Now, you can also have autoimmune stimulate an organ into excessive function, such as in Graves' disease, when the immune system attacks the thyroid, that actually causes hyperthyroid symptoms. Now, organs and tissues frequently affected by autoimmune disease include the hormonal glands, such as thyroid, pancreas, and adrenals, components of the blood cells, such as red blood cells. Also, oftentimes, the immune system can attack your connective tissues, such as skin, muscles, and joints. Now, you can experience several organ-specific diseases at the same time. This is called multiple autoimmunity. Now, in organ-specific autoimmune disease, the immune system is targeting specific organs. For example, with the thyroid, Hashimoto's attacking the thyroid gland, or pernicious anemia where the immune system is attacking the stomach lining, Addison's disease where the immune system attacking the adrenal gland, and so forth. Now, in non-organ specific disorders, autoimmune activity is widely spread out through the body. Example would be rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, or dermatomyositis. Now, who gets autoimmune disease? Well, while autoimmune disease can affect anyone, different groups are more susceptible to certain autoimmune diseases. In lupus, for example, African American women are 3 times more likely to get lupus than Caucasian women. Lupus is also more common in Hispanic, Asian, and Native Americans. Now, research shows that autoimmune diseases are much more prevalent in women compared to men, occurring in a rate of 2 to 1. Now, many autoimmune disorders tend to affect women during periods of extensive stress, such as pregnancy, emotional stressors, and even during times of hormonal change, such as menopause. Now, autoimmune disease tend to occur in families. If there's one case of autoimmune disease in the family, there's likely to be another. However, it's not always a specific autoimmune disease that runs in the family. So it's not like everybody in the family all will have Hashimoto's, but there's rather a tendency toward autoimmunity. So one family member can have lupus, while another family member can have Sjogren's disease, and another family member may have rheumatoid arthritis. Now, the number of people affected by autoimmune disease is around 50 million people. Now, you ask, is that a lot of people? Well, let me ask you this. What's the top 2 killers in the United States and in the Western world? Well, that's going to be cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and cancer. And guess how many people are affected by cardiovascular disease or diagnosed with cardiovascular disease? It's 30 million people. How many people are diagnosed with cancer? About 18 million people in the United States. So if you look at these 2 conditions, which gets a lot of press, a lot of research dollars, and it's obviously a very severe issue, none of these conditions even match the number of people who have autoimmune disease. Yet, you don't really hear that much about autoimmune. These people with autoimmune disease just simply don't get enough attention because these are such devastating conditions where it can kill you, but this condition just is a drawn out chronic issue. Now, there's problem with the treatment of autoimmune disease, okay? The number one problem is that the current medical model of autoimmune disease treatment is the wrong target. We're simply targeting the wrong area. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at cancer. So under the umbrella of cancer, what type of cancer do we have? Come on, we have breast cancer, we have brain cancer, right? We may have skin cancer, we may have thyroid cancer, right? Now with these different types of cancer, who's the doctor that manages the cancer? What type of doctor is that? It's called an oncologist. Oncologist, right? And it makes sense because cancer is treated by oncologists with chemoradiation. So that makes sense to have the doctor who's going to treat the cancer no matter what body parts it ends up. With autoimmune disease, that's not how we do it. So for example, in autoimmune disease, we may have multiple sclerosis, we may have rheumatoid arthritis, we may have psoriasis, and we may have Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's affect the thyroid, psoriasis affect the skin, MS affect the brain, rheumatoid arthritis affect the joint. Now, when you have Hashimoto's, what type of doctor do you go to? An endocrinologist. When you have psoriasis, a skin condition, autoimmune disease affecting the skin, what kind of doctor do you typically go to? A dermatologist. You're getting really good at this game. What type of doctor do you go to for multiple sclerosis, which is a neurological condition? Autoimmune attacking brain. What kind of doctor? A neurologist. When you have rheumatoid arthritis, what kind of doctor do you go to? Go to a rheumatologist or a joint doctor, right? When you have enough joint destruction. So you go to the doctor who's managing the end organ where the disease is affecting, but you're not seeing the doctor who's managing the autoimmune, right? So what happens in autoimmune disease, you're treating the end organ rather than the underlying cause of the problem. In cancer, we do that. We're treating the cancer with oncologists. But with autoimmune disease, you don't go to an immunologist. You go to the neurologist or the dermatologist, you go to the endocrinologist, but who's managing the immune system? In many of these autoimmune conditions, nobody's really managing the immune system. Now, that leads to the second problem. The second problem with the management of autoimmune disease is that the drugs are mostly immunosuppressive. And what that means is the drugs are basically suppressing the immune system because in autoimmune disease, the immune system's attacking your body. So if we can just shut the whole thing down, then your immune system's not attacking your body, then you feel better. You have symptom relief, which is all fine and good, except when you suppress the immune system, you're not just suppressing the part of the immune system that's attacking the joint, you're suppressing that same target that might be useful in killing infections. So these immunosuppressive therapy comes with very serious side effects, like you might just die from a simple infection that you normally can fight off and now you can't, right? So then these immunosuppressive drugs are not given to everyone with autoimmune disease. For example, those with Hashimoto's disease, they're not given immunosuppressive drug for the autoimmune disease attacking thyroid because the side effects are so strong, many times it's not worth it. So, and even if you can suppress the immune system, first of all, it does not address the root cause of why you have autoimmune disease. It's simply shutting the whole thing down, but what's causing it? Nobody knows, nobody cares, because we can just treat the symptom, then they're happy, they get return customers. That's just a medical model. It's all good because, with these immunotherapies, sometimes it helps some people, right? But none of these drugs help everybody. Let's say an immunosuppressive drug helps 50% of the people. Well, that's great for the 50% of people that get some symptom relief, even though the root cause is not addressed. But what about the other 50% who doesn't get better with immunotherapy? Right? What do you do when the medications don't work? What's your backup plan? Right? And now your doctor may say, well, there's nothing you can do, just live with it. Well, that's why we're here to give you this information, to help you to know that there is hope. There's things that you can do through natural means. Now, speaking of natural, that leads to the third problem with autoimmune treatment, natural healthcare providers. When you go see some type of natural healthcare providers, oftentimes they're saying, oh, it's all gut, or it's all toxins, it's all this and that. And so they give you a bunch of supplements, okay? They call immune support. Well, immune support, the question is, what part of the immune system are you trying to support, right? It's kind of like, on a football team, are you trying to support the running back? Are you trying to support a lineman? Are you trying to support a quarterback? You got to be more specific than that. Just saying immune support is not good enough. Just saying we're dampening inflammation is not good enough. You got to know who the players are. You got to know what part you're trying to support, so therefore you can be specific in your approach. And so that comes to the solutions. Okay, so the solution to autoimmune, as I see it, is that first you got to know thyself. What do I mean by know thyself? That means know how your body works. You got to have some basic knowledge of how the immune system works. Most people just think, oh, my immune system kills bugs. Your immune system does kill bugs, but it does more than just that, right? So you got to know who are all the players involved in the immune system, because if you know who the players are, you can support the ones that need more help. Secondly, you want to heal the barriers. Okay, so your immune system is made up of physical barriers, and many of these barriers are in your gut, but also involve your sinus, your lung, the blood-brain barrier, and so forth. So we got to heal the barriers, because the barrier is the route of entry for pathogens and so forth. Next, we want to put out the fire, because with autoimmune disease, there's a level of inflammation that you have that's more at baseline than people who don't have autoimmune disease. So you're going to have more inflammation, more inflammasome activation. And this inflammation is going to cause tissue damage. So you cannot wait, right, to put out the fire. You got to put out the fire now while you're addressing the root cause, right? It's right to address the root cause. But if you got a fire that's raging out of control, you got to protect your tissue, right? So that's why sometimes medication is necessary, short term, to put out the fire. But taking a medication doesn't necessarily address the root cause. So we can use nutrition to support that process of addressing the inflammation along with medication, or sometimes in some people, maybe they're afraid of the side effect from the medication, or the medication simply doesn't work for them. We can do natural things. And then next, we want to reduce the triggers, because you can put out the fire, but if you have arsonists who keep setting the fire, then you're just putting out fire all day and you're never going to get on top of it. So we need to reduce the triggers. These triggers may be dietary triggers, maybe stress triggers, and maybe toxin triggers, and maybe infectious triggers. We want to reduce the triggers. And lastly, mindset and knowledge. What do I mean by that? Because a lot of people with autoimmune disease, they're simply working from the wrong target, the wrong model. They think they need to see the hormone doctor, the endocrinologist for the Hashimoto's, when they need to be working on their immune system, right? Or they're taking a bunch of supplements. They think just because it's natural, it's all good. But natural doesn't mean it's all good, because you can take the wrong supplement and support the wrong players and actually make yourself worse. So the mindset and the knowledge is going to be really important. And that's what this video is about. So let's continue by talking about the different players involved in autoimmune. Now, let's talk about all the players that are involved in autoimmune disease and what you need to focus on and where to put your attention to. So here we have inflammation. Now, inflammation and autoimmune can cause each other. When you have autoimmune disease, your immune system's attacking your own tissue. Therefore, you have this baseline level of higher inflammation than people who don't have autoimmune. So autoimmune automatically means that you're going to have some degree of inflammation. And inflammation is going to drive more autoimmune disease. So it becomes a vicious cycle. Now, inflammation is really an immune system response. Inflammation is not necessarily bad. Just like autoimmune disease, it's part of normal. Our body has certain levels of cellular turnover where dead and dying cells are getting rid of. And that's what autoimmune disease does, is to do that. The problem is when your body is not able to regulate it and suppress it to a certain degree, now you get a disease in autoimmune. Same thing with inflammation. Inflammation is your immune system's response to killing pathogens. That's how your body get rid of bad guys. So inflammation is all good when you have an infection or some pathogen to get rid of. But if the inflammation persists too long, then you're going to have tissue damage, and that's going to cause problems. So inflammation and autoimmune disease cause or drive each other. Now, we talked about the brain immune gut triad, or the brain immune gut axis. So you have inflammation being an immune system response, just like autoimmune is an immune system response. You have inflammation, we have brain, and we have gut. So there's your brain, immune, gut triangle. Now, what happens is when you have inflammation in your body, it'll cause brain inflammation as well. Because systemic inflammation that's circulating in your blood eventually can either stimulate the immune system in your brain to cause brain inflammation, or it can cross the blood-brain barrier, that's the BBB, blood-brain barrier, and cause brain inflammation. So the systemic inflammation can cause brain inflammation. And brain inflammation can come back and cause systemic inflammation. It's a two-way street. Now, gut dysbiosis, which means that the microbiome, the bacteria count, the pathogen count in your gut, you always have certain level of gut organisms in your gut. But the problem is when the opportunistic or bad bacteria is growing too much and the beneficial bacteria is not enough, or the ratio is out of balance, then you're going to have what's called gut dysbiosis. And that gut dysbiosis can also drive systemic inflammation. And a systemic inflammation in your body can also cause gut dysbiosis by way of causing leaky gut. So when you have inflammation in your body, you have all these chemical soup and chemical messengers like cytokines that are driving each other, and that can promote leaky gut. Now know that there's a brain-gut connection as well. So as you get gut dysbiosis and leaky gut, it's going to drive brain inflammation, and brain inflammation is going to come back and cause more leaky gut, and therefore drive dysbiosis. So here we see this three-way triangle where the brain, immune, gut axis or triad is start to drive chronic illness. Okay, and all of this because the brain inflammation and the gut dysbiosis drive inflammation, which means that's going to drive autoimmunity. So there's not a single pill or a magic bullet for autoimmune, but it's understanding all the players and start to stack the odds in your favor by addressing these issues one by one in a step-by-step approach. Now here, interestingly, you see stress physiology. So what that means is stress is something that you perceive, right? It's something that you make up in your brain. Now you might say, well, my job is stressful, my life is stressful, but still, that stress response is something you perceive, right? You perceive the stress, and then your body act in kind. Literally, it creates this the chemistry and the physiology of stress. So by you just thinking of something stressful, you're literally causing your body to react that way. And that stress chemistry, stress physiology, turns out it also drives inflammation as well. Okay? Now, all of this inflammation response, what it's going to do, it's going to come down and it's going to suppress innate immunity. Innate immunity is that part of your immune system that are responsible for killing pathogen. That includes your macrophages, your neutrophil, your dendritic cells, your eosinophils. These white blood cells are the first on scene when there's a pathogen, and they're the foot soldiers of your immune system that kill pathogens. But when you have chronic inflammation, it's going to dampen innate immunity. Okay? When you dampen innate immunity, it's going to decrease your ability to kill infections, because the innate immunity is what's responsible for killing pathogens. So then viruses, you can have reactivation of chronic viruses, or you just get sick frequently, or you have a virus you have chronically like Epstein-Barr that you just can't clear. You may have chronic bacteria issues like SIBO that you can't clear. You may have candida, overgrowth. You may have even parasites that you can't get rid of because your immune system simply cannot do its job. So it's going to suppress immune system, which is going to actually cause the infection to go up. You get more pathogen burden. As your innate immunity goes down, it's going to cause your T helper 1 immune system. These are the immune cells that basically signal to the innate immunity to say, hey, go do your job. Because this is down, then therefore the T helper 1 immune system, which are the dispatchers of innate immunity, is going to also decrease in its function. Now, the T helper 1 or Th1 immune cells, they work in tandem with the T helper 2 immune cells. So they're like a teeter-totter. T helper 1 gets your immune system to go kill things. T helper 2 make antibodies, antibody production. An antibody is your body's memory system to remember who the bad guys are, so the next time you see the same bad guy, you can attack it. So when you have a decreased T helper 1 response, it's going to lead to an increased T helper 2 response, because it's like a teeter-totter. When this side's weaker, this side's going to automatically become stronger. And when you have an increased T helper 2 response, that means your antibody production is going to go up, which will drive allergies to things in your environment like dust, pollen, chemicals even. You can develop more sensitivities to food that you're sensitive to, even to self-tissue, which is autoimmunity. You're also going to drive hollow space infection. Hollow spaces are cavities within your body, like sinuses, like your lung is a hollow space. Your gut is actually a hollow space, right? Think of your gut as a tube, intestinal tract with the holes in it that allow you to house the food and transport food. So your lung, your gut, your sinuses, your urinary tract, like your bladder. People get frequent bladder infection, chronic UTIs, and then vaginosis. For females, you may have chronic bacterial vaginosis or a yeast overgrowth, vaginal yeast. These are all problems with hollow space infection that can cause by an increase in T helper 2 immune function, too much, and decrease in T helper 1 immune function, which lead to decreased ability for you to kill pathogens, specifically in those hollow spaces. Okay, and asthma is another manifestation of that. Now you see these color in orange, these are your barriers. Remember, your immune system are made up of physical barriers to keep the outside world from the inside. That's kind of your fort, your castle wall, so to speak. So if you have blood-brain barrier that's compromised because of brain inflammation, you're going to have more problem, more chemicals and more cytokines that can get through to the brain, causing brain inflammation. If you have leaky gut, then the things that you eat and the microbial content can leak out into your systemic circulation, and that's going to cause more inflammation in your body. And then if these hollow spaces, which are also your fort, your barrier, right? So these are the barrier systems, your gut, brain, lung barrier, your mucosal barrier. These are areas that protect you from the outside world. If they're compromised, that's going to cause you to have more infections, and which is going to drive more inflammation. So you see this interplay between brain, immune, gut, which drive autoimmune, but then also it also suppresses your immune system in such a way that produces pattern of more allergies and sensitivity. Now what happens here is that when you have a decreased T helper 1 response and an increased T helper 2 response, both of these, this one being weaker, this one being too strong, causes an increase in T helper 17 response. The Th17 immune cells is what mediates the autoimmune destruction. This is what causes the destruction of your tissue, like in rheumatoid arthritis, your joint gets damaged, people with thyroid, the thyroid cells get burned out. This is all driven by this T helper 17 response. Okay, so that's going to drive autoimmune. So we have this kind of a cycle going on, because once you have this immune system imbalance, this is an imbalance, right? Weaker, too much, you're going to drive autoimmune process, and guess what autoimmune does? It's a two-way street with inflammation. So as you get more autoimmune due to this weakness, you get more inflammation, and this whole cycle starts again. Now, what we have here is that there are also additional drivers of inflammation, and these factors include oxygen. So oxygen, meaning, do you have anemia? Because anemia is a condition where your red blood cell, you don't have enough red blood cell, or you don't have a hemoglobin, which means that you can't carry oxygen as well in your blood, and that's going to compromise your oxygen delivery to your tissue. Blood pressure problem with whether it's low blood pressure or high blood pressure, both are going to cause oxygen delivery problems. And circulatory problem. If you have poor circulation, you have small vessel disease, that's also going to cause problems. Blood sugar imbalance, whether it's high blood sugar, insulin resistance, diabetes, or low blood sugar, they're both going to cause inflammation. They can drive this entire physiology that we're discussing here. Food sensitivity, if you're sensitive to gluten, you're not willing to give it up, you're sensitive to whatever food it is that you're sensitive to, that maybe you're not even aware that you're sensitive to, but you can continue to consume it. That's going to drive this inflammatory response and leaky gut, which is going to drive this entire cycle. If you have environmental toxin exposure, things like heavy metals, or mycotoxin or mold exposure, or endocrine disrupting chemicals, things like in plastic, BPA, fire retardant material, these chemicals can not only disrupt your hormone function, but also drive inflammation by causing oxidative stress. And then hormone imbalances themselves, whether it's from thyroid hormone imbalance, adrenal hormone imbalance, sex hormone imbalances, these can all drive inflammation, impact your brain, impact your gut as well. And then we have trauma. Trauma could be physical trauma, like a car accident, like concussion or traumatic brain injury, like when you hit your head. Could be a chronic injury, like you keep having, recurrent ankle sprain because you play sports and never heal properly. That can continue to create cellular debris because your tissue is damaged. You're going to have cellular debris, and that cellular debris is going to drive more inflammation. Remember, inflammation is your immune system's way of killing pathogens, but also that's how your body clear up cellular debris. So that cellular debris is going to drive inflammation and autoimmunity. Now, mental trauma can do it too. PTSD, for example, or emotional abuse. That can cause stress physiology, and as you know, that can drive this cycle. And then lastly, obesity, metabolic issues, right? If you have obesity or you're sedentary, you don't move enough. See, movement is key to life. And if you're not moving enough, and then also you have obesity associated with it, that can also be very inflammatory as well, and that can drive this whole cycle. So these are the the key primary drivers of chronic illness, chronic inflammation, and autoimmunity. So let's talk about what can we do to address this. So we talked about barriers, right? So the green's going to be the solution here. So we can heal the barriers. The gut barrier is one that's really heals really fast because those intestinal lining cells, they turn over every 3 days. So that gives us a great opportunity to get a fresh start. And healing leaky gut can be a great way to start this process. We can also support the blood-brain barrier. How do we do that? We can support leaky gut, which has an impact on the blood-brain barrier itself. We can also reduce brain inflammation because brain inflammation is going to degrade the blood-brain barrier. So if we can dampen brain inflammation with different flavonoid compounds like resveratrol and turmeric, fish oil, then we can help to heal the blood-brain barrier. The next is your mucosal barriers like your lungs, sinuses, UTI. Now what can we do there? Primarily the target here is actually to dampen the T helper 2 immune cells, support the T helper 1 immune cells so that your immune system can actually kill pathogens better. And when you can decrease pathogen load, then these barriers have less bugs on them that's causing tissue damage, then there's a greater chance for your tissue to heal properly. Okay? And also specifically for the lungs and sinuses, there may be local things that we can do. If you have chronic sinusitis, we may have you do some type of nebulizer, nebulizing either glutathione, or we can have you nebulize essential oils of clove and thyme, or even using garlic oil, nebulizing that, oregano oil to help to locally decrease pathogen load. We can do that for the lung as well by breathing in treatment, or we can use specific supplements to help to decrease, again, pathogen load. And then for the fire, right? So with all this, we have this inflammation. So we talk about barrier, that's first step. And then we have the fire that we need to address. We need to put out the fire. Okay, so there's specific things we can do to decrease that inflammation. Now, there are many, many different players involved in inflammation. Inflammation is not one thing. Inflammation is a multi-system orchestrated immune response. We'll have a future video that specifically talk about all the different players involved in inflammation. But for inflammation, we have to address it from a holistic approach. Now, some of the more famous or more common pathways of addressing inflammation include things like fish oil, glutathione, turmeric, and resveratrol, although there are other things that are involved in as well. And then here we have autoimmune. How can we modulate autoimmune? Well, know that there's a specific type of white blood cell that's called a T helper or the T regulatory cells. The T regulatory cells help you to regulate all these guys and have a dampening effect on this inflammatory process. So for autoimmune, we want to support the T regulatory cells. And the things that can help with that will be glutathione, vitamin D, sometimes vitamin A can be helpful. But with all these supplements, we don't have a free hand at just like dump a bunch of supplements in there because these immune responses all have a reason why they're there. So we don't want to suppress it like in a drug situation where you're just suppressing the whole thing, because if you have an infection you can't clear and you dampen way too much inflammation, then that may impair your ability to get rid of infection. So it's all about balance. It's all about understanding which player is weaker and we give specific interventions. So we want to put out the fire. We want to support the immune system in balance. We want to heal the barriers. And then we got to find the triggers, right? So these are possible triggers. So this may come down to a very detailed history, understanding symptoms and where they come from. We may have to do lab tests so we're not guessing, so we can know exactly what you have. So, but for circulation problems, definitely exercise will be really important. Exercise is one of the most important things that people can do. Most people just want to find some magic supplement, and some supplement can be very magical if it's the right thing for you. But exercise is something that we all can leverage more. Blood sugar imbalance can be attained by eating specific way. Low blood sugar people may need to eat more small frequent meals, where people with insulin resistance may benefit from more fasting or even a ketogenic diet. Food sensitivity require you to either identify the food that you're sensitive to by doing a detailed dietary history, or you can do some type of elimination diet to see what works for you. Environmental toxin exposure, again, it's about identifying the source of the exposure. If you're currently living in a moldy environment, then it behooves you to identify whether there is mold in your environment, like where is that coming from, and then remediate the mold so you're not continuing to living in there, because there's not enough supplement you can take to get rid of the mold if you're living in it, right? So that's really the key thing about toxin, is that the reducing exposure is the best thing for detoxification. Because if you just don't get exposed in the first place, then you don't accumulate. So we'll do well to reduce exposure, and then there are also things we can do to support detoxification with nutritional supplements. Hormones, this obviously requires testing to see what your levels are. And sometimes the hormone problem is not because you need to take a hormone. Sometimes the hormone problem is because you don't have precursors, you don't have the right nutrients, or you have inflammation. For example, Hashimoto's, you have thyroid gland destruction caused by inflammation and autoimmune destruction of the thyroid gland. So it's not necessarily the thyroid hormone is the end-all be-all, but you need to address the reason why the thyroid gland is being destroyed, which might be any of these things that we're talking about. Physical trauma, obviously rehab or address the inflammation from the trauma. And then obesity, sedentary activity, there's things that you can do there as well. So hopefully this video helped you to see that the big picture from a 30,000 feet view, all the different players involved, will have specific video that will address each of these specific pieces. But nonetheless, this will help you to get a good start, a jump start to understanding the process and start to put the pieces together. If you learned something that helped you understand autoimmune disease better, please hit the like button. It will mean a lot to me. Check out my other videos on autoimmune to go deeper on this topic. And if you have not subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe so you get notified when I release new videos and live streams. God bless you, and see you in the next video.